Who is the most underrated actor of all time?
It's Dolph Lundgren.
Correct. Why?
Well, because of his spiky hair and his ice-cold demeanor and his big muscles.
Absolutely.
I must break you. The guilty will be punished.
My name is Sergeant Andrew Scott.
Come on, guys, don't do this. If I don't get breakfast, I get real grumpy. I don't think you like me grumpy.
And you go in pieces, asshole.
Let's kick some ass.
Hello and welcome back to I Must Break This Podcast, the fan podcast celebrating the cinematic career of action legend Dolph Lundgren. Today we're going to 2013 and looking at the action, horror, science fiction hybrid Battle of the Damned. In this new take on the zombie genre, Dolph plays Major Max Gatling, a special forces badass who teams up with a band of renegade robots to fend off an unrelenting army of the undead.
You'll have to move fast. In and out, no more than a day. And don't believe what you may have heard. There's nothing in there now.
You think you're the first? There's been others like you. They all died. Welcome to hell. There's no way out of the infection zone. Robots. Where'd they come from?
What are you? Advanced utility robots.
You dangerous?
Yes.
Zombies, killer robots. Nice town you got here. Who's your commander?
Major Max Gatling.
I'm your host, Sean Malloy, and joining me to chat this one is Ryan Rebalkin from Going the Distance, the Rocky series podcast. Ryan, it's been a while that I've been wanting you on for a long time, but I'm glad we were able to make it happen. Thank you so much.
It's my absolute pleasure to be here today. I truly am excited to talk about this film, to talk about our journey to this film and everything involved with it.
Well, and actually, and before we get to this film, I do have to ask you a bit. I mean, because you've been podcasting a while, and your current show is Going the Distance, the Rocky series podcast. I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about that, because it's my understanding that pretty much your show, you guys take a look at all of the Rocky films from the very first Rocky, and currently you're up to Creed 2. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. It's a journey that started about 5 years ago with my brother, but now I have two new co-hosts that have joined the show since that time. That's Katie and Kyle. They're excellent co-hosts. We love them, and Ruben's given us full support. That's my brother. He just went on to bigger and better things in his life, and he doesn't podcast anymore because 5 years is a long time. We had a casting change, you could say. Anyway, so we're on season 8 of the show, which coincides with Creed 2 being the 8th film in the Rocky franchise. And each season has anywhere from 15 to 25 plus episodes. And we break down the film in order, and we scatter interviews throughout the breakdown of the movies. And if you want to check it out and you're a big Rocky fan, we're on the Last of the Action Heroes podcast network. So if you're listening to Sean's show on a feed that isn't that network, we encourage you to come over and check out our show and other shows on our network. We've got James Bond podcast. We've got Bruce Willis movies. We've got, of course, the Dolph Lundgren podcast, which you're listening to now. Arnold Schwarzenegger. another Rocky coverage called Rocky Minute, Slycast, which breaks down Sylvester Stallone films. I'm missing somebody because I'm doing this. Oh yeah, Steven Seagal even. So I can't forget Steven. Did I forget anybody? Because I'm doing this off the top of my head, and we got a few shows on our. I think it's everyone. So, anyways, check us out on the Last of the Action Heroes Podcast Network.
So, I guess my big question for you, and I was going to ask you this offline, but I'll just ask it right now. So, sure. when you guys are finished with Creed 2, where do you guys go from there? Like, I mean, that's my big wondering. If you guys have 5 years invested in this, I'd hate to see it end. I imagine it will not end. So what's going to be the next step?
I wish I could clone myself into 3 different persons, or me, 3 Ryans, because I want to revisit the Rocky movies with Katie and Kyle. Because time has passed, I think my podcasting skills have improved, which isn't saying much. I'm just saying I think they're a little bit better than when I first started.
I know the feeling.
Also, yeah, I think most podcasters kind of are like that. We start, we don't know. I remember when I first started, my first episode is almost unlistenable, but it's kind of fun to go back and listen to it. And I like to thank anyone that stuck with the show after the first, half of my first season. But anyways, so there's that kind of thought process, but I wouldn't say I'm getting tired of Rocky, because that's not how I feel at all about the franchise, but I kind of want to challenge myself in other ways. And one of those ways is actually just the Rambo franchise. Take the same coverage and format and just roll right into the Rambo franchise, because there's a lot of fans of Rambo. In fact, there's a lot of Rambo fans that aren't Rocky fans. They don't always coincide. People are Rambo fans that aren't Rocky fans. So there's a new audience out there that would like to hear, I think, the coverage of the Rambo films. And lastly, I don't know, there's part of me wants to end Creed 2 quicker than I started. I know that sounds terrible to anyone who listens to my show, because it's not in a bad way, but it's a harder film to get through. I love the film. Because it's not quite a Rocky film, I've been torn. I'm tackling it the same way I did it with the Rocky films, giving it the same coverage and I don't know if I should have. If that makes sense. I should have maybe just done the Rocky scenes. If I could have gone back in time, I might have just done the breakdown of the scenes that Rocky's in. If that makes sense.
Well, it's so funny.
It's taken long. Sorry, it's just taken a little bit longer than I anticipated, and I'm doing a lot of sailing coming up. So it's just the season's broken up a little bit longer than I anticipated because of my sailing schedule in the Navy too.
Well, it's so funny that you mentioned the early shows and the early seasons, because it's really kind of funny and serendipitous, I guess, the fact that we are covering and discussing Battle of the Damned for this one, because it's interesting. I went back through and checked out one of my early episodes, and like you, I'm kind of like, oh my god, it was almost virtually unlistenable. I felt, I mean, and obviously they say, you are your harshest critic, so I get that as well. But it's funny because my very first interview episode that I ever did for the show, so it was episode 4, so back in the early days. And for anyone, just to give context, okay, so episode 4 of the show, I got to speak with Christopher Hatton, who was the writer and the director of the film that we're talking about today, Battle of the Damned, okay? So that was episode 4. We are now in the 70s. Terms of episodes. That shows you how long it's been going.
Crazy.
I went back through. Yeah, I went back through after watching Battle of the Damned. I decided, well, I'm going to listen to that conversation again, just to kind of pick up on some tidbits for our conversation today. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, I wasn't using the right recording equipment then, and I'm nervous and everything in the interview. Right. I mean, it's not my shining moment. But Christopher Hatton, God bless him, was an absolute gentleman and was wonderful to talk to. So
it's interesting you brought up Christopher Hatton, because I have some thoughts on him, and I'll not say some of the things I was going to say because you interviewed him. In fact, that was one of my questions I was going to ask you, is if you've talked to him. So let me go back now and say, how did you get a hold of him? And did he indicate in the interview why he hasn't done any films since 2013, or since this film, 2013?
He not really, but I mean, he is, I think, like a lot of people in the entertainment industry, especially writers and directors, getting a project underway and seeing it. I mean, there's tons of, thousands of scripts that are out there, amazing scripts, I imagine, that I think just are not getting made because they're not being shopped around to the right people. And I think the industry is pretty much a lot of, who do you know? You got to know the right person. And so I think Christopher Hatton is working, and he is, working in various capacities, but in terms of writing and directing his own project, I think that is a huge, laborious task to get something like that underway. So yeah, it's interesting, but I'll admit, man, granted, this is a small, little, independent action, horror, science fiction hybrid, like I said earlier, but I'll admit, this is so much better than I think it has any right to be. And I mean, I was going to get to it at the end, at least in my opinion, but the camera shots that this film takes, the overall coloring, the coloring palette of the film, I mean, it has a very moody, atmospheric, look and style to this film that I think is pretty refreshing and welcome.
Boy, you're just going right into it, eh? Are we going to talk about what we're drinking first? Because you made me go buy alcohol for this podcast, which I don't drink and podcast because I think it can be, it can deter my already sloppy podcasting skills. But not that you or I have ever gotten drunk on a podcast, but I think it's fun to do when there's a proper theme. And tonight, I think we both picked one that has a theme. What's your drink of choice?
Okay, so hold on. All right, I just cracked it open.
There's the crack.
So, I mean, if you've listened to the shows, I try to pick a beverage that I think aligns with the film thematically in some kind of way. And so, I'll be honest, a lot of times I just kind of look at the can, and if it's a cool looking can, I will, I will partake. So this one, it is called a Dagger Flute Citra India Pale Ale. It's by the Illuminated Brew Works out of Chicago, and I mainly got it. I think I sent you a picture. It has Gene Simmons on the cover, so his face paint, and there's a sword in the middle. I don't know if it really aligns with this particular film, but I thought it was just a really wicked looking can, so I figured, hey, I'm going to do this one.
Well, Craig's a big Kiss fan, so I think he'll appreciate that.
Yeah. How about you?
Well, mine is from the Tree Brewing Company in Kelowna, British Columbia. Their tagline is "The best things in life are tree." Yes, BC being a tree-hugging province, which we love. But the name of this beer, and the reason why I picked this one, is because it's called Cutthroat.
Nice.
And there was so much throat cutting in this film that I thought, of zombies' throats being cut. I thought the title of this beer was perfect. So let me crack it open, and cheers, and good luck to our podcast this evening. Yeah.
Well, and actually, okay, so I have to ask you real quick, okay, before we look at Battle of the Damned.
Please.
Obviously, you're a big guy, you're a big Rocky guy, Rambo, all of that. How about Mr. Lundgren? I mean, I know that when I gave you the list of films that I had coming up before you landed on this one, I think it's fair to say you hadn't seen any of those films. I don't think you had really even heard of those particular films. So I guess in terms of action stars, where does Mr. Lundgren stand for you?
Well, of course, I'm a huge Rocky fan, Stallone fan, and I admit I haven't followed Dolph's career, his straight-to-DVD career or video career, which started fairly early in his acting, very well. I was a big Van Damme fan growing up as well. I think Sly and Van Damme were my two top action stars. I'm born in 1975, so I was right there in the heyday of all that stuff. But I always enjoyed Dolph, and I think the problem with Dolph at the beginning of his career, through no fault of his own, but he could both be thankful for playing Drago, and it's kind of like a blessing and curse situation, is that he's such an imposing figure, like Schwarzenegger. He's kind of limited in his own. I guess he's his own worst enemy. Schwarzenegger, for example, is a beast of a man, but he has a personality, and I think Dolph, I don't know, I think he's a little bit more, I wouldn't say robotic, but I don't know if he tries to play it that way or he's just not a very ranged actor. And so he really is relying a lot on just being the big, tough, quiet talking, almost like a foreign, large Clint Eastwood type character. But to answer your question, I root for Dolph, and I want him to do well, and I'm glad he's still acting. And a lot of the movies, and I listen to your show, and I admit I'll listen to episodes of podcasts. I listen to your episodes of movies I haven't seen, but I will go and watch some of the movies that you've talked about after you've talked about it, just to check it out. And so going into this, I think I had low expectations. And we'll get to some of the details of where I was both, irritated but also entertained at the same time. And I don't expect much more from what I saw from this. And I feel bad for Dolph because when he's in the movies like The Expendables or Universal Soldier and all these other films, when he has the right director with the right script, he's a lot of fun to watch. And I just feel bad that he's straight to the DVD bin.
Well, why this particular film? Because I mean, I know I gave you a list of films. I can't remember how many titles I gave you, and I hope it wasn't slim pickings for you. But I know this particular film. Yeah, I can't remember.
It was a few months back.
This one you singled out though. Like this one, you came to me and you said, "I want to discuss this one." So I guess my big question for you is, why Battle of the Damned? Was it the whole robots versus zombies conceit that really intrigued you? I guess, and my follow-up question to that is, are you a big science fiction fan, a big zombie, kind of guy? What's going on there?
Great questions. I'm a huge fan of The Walking Dead, but the reason why I love The Walking Dead is because of the human storyline. I find zombies terrifyingly boring. I think the zombie concept, I don't find them scary. I think they're kind of gross. The fact that they just eat people, it's not something that I enjoy watching, but I love The Walking Dead, and I still watch it this day. Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment myself, but I love The Walking Dead, but I hate zombie-based protagonists or enemies. I find the whole concept of them boring. However, I'm a huge science fiction fan. Yeah, but I'm a huge science fiction fan. I love robots, love space, and I love action films anyways. And I love Dolph, and I want him to do well, and I've always rooted for him. So I think the reason why we tackled this, it was a few months back. I think it was almost 4 or 5 months ago when we talked about this future date recording. I think it must have been the zombies and robots, but I will admit, when I started watching this, I completely forgot the concept. And so when the robots were introduced, we'll talk about them, of course, but when they were introduced, I was like, oh my, what is going on here? So I admit, I'd forgotten everything. So I watched this very cold. Never saw the trailer. So I went in this extremely cold, not knowing there was robots to begin with.
Well, I'll give you a little bit of backstory, but before we really look at the film. And again, a lot of this comes from Mr. Hatton, because this was, again, my very first interview for the podcast. Was I got to speak at length with Christopher Hatton, and so the film was initially conceived as being a follow-up sequel to the director's previous film, called Robotropolis. Okay. And so if you look,
right.
I have not seen, okay, you saw that. Yeah. And so I have not watched all of Robotropolis. I've seen the trailer and a couple clips and everything. But the most interesting fact I think about that particular film is the robots in that film they look exactly the same as the robots in Battle of the Damned. So it could almost be looked upon as being an unofficial sequel of sorts, but they didn't change up the robot design from that film.
It's the Chris Hatton universe. Exactly. The Chris Hatton universe.
He's created his own universe. And so, man. He was conceptualizing this idea, and when he brought it to the financiers to get the project rolling, they basically told him, look, we want to do this project. We think it sounds like a lot of fun. We also want to add Dolph Lundgren to the project. And so what Chris Hatton did when he, of course he said yes to that because they're putting up the money for it, right? So
sure.
Once he discovered that Dolph Lundgren was going to be on board this particular project, he came upon the decision, which was very wise, as he said, and I remember he said this in the interview, he says, look, I watched a bunch of his films, and anytime he's on screen, it is a Dolph Lundgren movie. He sucks the air out of the room. It is his movie. So we're going to make him the main character, and we are going to have everything revolve around him. And so the character of Max Gatling, this was written for Dolph Lundgren and with Dolph Lundgren in mind for this particular film. And I will say right now, the name Max Gatling, like, what a cool name. Like, what a badass name. I mean, there's so much about this film. I don't know if you picked up on it or not, but it's very clear, and Chris Hatton even echoed this to me as well. both he and Dolph were fans of Snake Plissken, Kurt Russell's Snake Plissken character.
Right.
And so there's a lot of parallels between Snake Plissken and Max Gatling that are pretty similar, which are a lot of fun. But this was right out of the gate. This was pretty much reworked to make it a Dolph Lundgren centered movie. It was filmed in Malaysia, and so I don't know if you watched the behind the scenes video that I sent you or not, but it was filmed in Malaysia.
I missed that. I actually didn't. My bad. I didn't see the video. Okay.
Oh no.
Continue. Well, I missed the video.
It's available. It's available on YouTube, so you can totally check it out. But if you watch it, I mean, it just looks like everybody was having a lot of fun on set, which is saying a lot considering the conditions. Yeah. Because if
I can see that. I can see that they were having fun. I believe that. Dolph didn't dial this in. I know the Bruce Willis podcast, where there's a Willis, there's a way. A lot of the movies they've talked about with Bruce, they'll often mention, and rightfully so, that Bruce kind of dials in a lot of his performance. And I think, Dolph here, he's executive producer of this film as well. You can tell that he has a vested interest in making this film good.
Well, especially considering if you look at the filming locations, okay? Like I was saying, this was filmed in Malaysia, and this is a country that is relatively close to the equator. So I guess they were dealing with just brutally hot days on set. And you can almost tell in many of the shots, especially when they're running through the streets, it just seems like everybody is just caked in sweat. And I think that kind of lends itself well to the themes and the tone of the film.
Well, do you want to get started?
Yeah, so let's get going. I guess, look, before we pick this film apart, I have to ask, because I know I kind of gave my recommendation fairly a little early, how I said that I think it's much better than it has any right to be. But I'll go to you real quick. Did you at least find more enjoyment out of this film than critique, I guess we could say?
I always judge movies or music, for that matter, or anything. I'm against to what it wants to be, right? Meaning, like, I know that it weren't making an Oscar film, so I don't judge it like that. I don't look at films. Films are like a meal or a snack or something. Like, you know when you're going to have a peanut butter sandwich, you can still rate that peanut butter sandwich against all other peanut butter sandwiches. So you can say, oh, I don't like crunchy, or I like a little bit more butter, or I like to have white bread instead of brown bread. You know what? So that's fair. You're judging a peanut butter sandwich against other peanut butter sandwiches types. So this is a straight to video. Understandably, it's a lower budget film. So I know that. I know going in, that's what I'm not comparing it to, was it a Christopher Nolan film? You know what I mean? Like, I recognize that.
Not to interrupt you, but I mean, let's
sure.
World War Z. I think World War Z and this film are fairly similar in in their overall tone and themes and everything like that. But World War Z is also working with four
larger
times
budget.
The budget of this. Yeah,
well, more than that easily. Yeah. Well, this movie did cost $8 million, which is not cheap for an independent film. But that being said, so I went into with that, and so I did judge it. So my critiques are actually still they are not on the CGI or maybe the makeup or that sort of thing. So I do have critiques and problems with this film. Was I entertained? Yeah, I was. I had fun, and there's actually a couple legit good moments that I thought, oh, we have something here. So we can go. Do you want to go in chronological order? Because I actually took notes sort of in chronological order. I'll take your lead on how you want to go through this. Or do you just want to go through the critiques or say the things we like first? Whatever order you want. You're the boss.
I'm the boss. Thank you very much. No, well, there's two things actually before we. And I know that we're kind of setting this up big time looking at the film, but one of the things that I noticed about it, I don't know if you did either, but I'm pretty sure that most of the zombies that we see in the film are simply extras who were living in Malaysia at the time. And I think the direction for them was essentially, we're just going to paint your faces with smeared blood, and we just want you to run. Okay, I think that was pretty much the direction, was we just want you to run. But I will say it, man, they do an awesome job, and they are downright frightening in this film. I mean, they're not the slow-moving zombies like from Night of the Living Dead. They are sprinting in this film, and it's freaking frightening. Every scene they are in, I'll admit it.
Yeah, it's better than the lumbering zombies of like The Walking Dead, for example. This is definitely the running insane. a version of the zombie, which I like. That's the World War Z version, where they are runners. I guess they don't fatigue the way humans do, or are non-zombies. And they do mention in the film that they're not quote-unquote zombies, that there's some sort of cerebral disconnect where they're just more animalistic and crazy. They don't speak. You can't communicate with them. They do want to eat you. That seems to be the big thing. They do tear people apart and eat them, consume them. So I do have problems with the zombies, though, where this is a problem in all films dealing with creatures. If they don't, or if they're not consistent within their own universe, that's the thing. So they're in this universe, yes, they're running. Well, we should say, why are these zombies? We should tell our audience why do we have zombies? And you said that they're Asian. Well, that's because the city that's infected is in an Asian nation, but they never say what Asian nation, or did I miss it?
No, they don't say it. I think that was pretty much, look, these are who the financiers of this film are, so this is where it's going to be filmed, and so what you see. Okay, but that's the
problem with what we get, and that's one of the problems I have with the film is, yes, they do mention in the news or whatever it was, the narration of the news, that a city had a virus from some sort of government lab or biolab, and this was again 8 years before Corona. So take it for what you will here, but art and life and art. But a virus was created in the lab, and it got out, and it infected the city, which is fine. Some no name country, no name Asian city. So the fact that the majority of the zombies are Asian, that's fine. That's where it's located. But that's part of the problem with some of the cast of the characters that we see is we have a lot of white survivors or a lot of white players. And I was a little confused about why the guy who created the virus, this is, I guess, sort of a spoiler alert, but if you haven't watched the movie yet, the guy that created the virus, he's the one that hires Dolph Lundgren as a private ex-military member to go get his daughter out of this city, because the city, now this is where it gets a little bit, I'm a little bit infuriated by the plot. Okay, there's huge plot holes in this film, which is fine. And this is where I'm not trying to criticize the film for being straight to video, because even if you're straight to video or have a low budget, it doesn't mean you have to have big plot holes. And it can be easily explained or talked out of without even showing anything, just by the narration of the characters. And that's what we get. We get narration from the characters where they say, the city is quarantined. People can't get in and they can't get out. That's fair because it's quarantined. But my question is, if they're able to man such a huge area, why don't they just wipe out the zombies to begin with inside, if that's the problem?
Well, okay, so you said a couple things there. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I did.
Well, no, I mean, and I'm right there with you. So there's actually two revelations that are introduced fairly early in the film, actually. And before we get to those, I just want to give, credit and props to the first 15 minutes of this film. Okay, and this is something else that Chris Hatton said on our interview, was he really wanted to start this film out with a bang. So then that way it had some time to breathe and the audience was not bored. And so I will say the first 15 minutes are really quite good, where basically you get some brief exposition where, like you said, Max Gatling, he's hired by this rich industrialist to go into this plagued city of the undead to rescue his daughter. And so what we see in this first 15 minutes is we get that brief exposition, okay, and then we basically get a 15-minute long chase sequence where we get tons of running zombies, and like we said, instead of the slow-moving zombies, they're doing lots of shaky cam. And I really do appreciate and like the look of Lundgren and his commandos, because they're all smeared with grease and they're all sweaty. They're wearing this black body armor. I also like how Lundgren is wearing a bandana of sorts in this opening scene, just to make him look more badass. One thing that does not, unfortunately, come off too flattering. And look, I mean, I've never had a hip replacement surgery, but Lundgren was actually a couple years removed from having a hip replacement surgery. So in these
that was one of my notes. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you there.
Yeah, and well, no, you can see that he's struggling a bit, and God bless him to be doing a film like this and trying his best running, considering what he has on, half of his body is a replacement.
You know what they should have done?
Props.
Yeah, sorry, I keep stepping on you there. I apologize.
No.
Yeah, I noticed the lumbering run that he had, and it was quite noticeable. And I know he's not that old. In this film, he would have been at least, I guess, maybe, 50, 48, or no, 50. 53 maybe, because I think he's 63 now or something. So early 50s. But yeah, he was running really terribly. And what I would have done had I been them, like, yeah, okay, he's human. You know, he's got a hip replacement. He's good for him to be out there and running and standing and doing all this movement. I would have had that opening sequence that you're talking about, have him land on his hip, make it so he's injured for the rest of the film.
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah. And then he's having to, I mean, that injury is affecting him throughout the film. I like that, actually.
Then he just naturally, because when you see this film, it was noticeable. It's like, he just, I hate to say, he looked terrible running. He looked like an old man running. And I feel bad for saying that. But his gaunt and his run it was slow and lumbering. And we're expected him to run away from these zombies that are very fast. It was a juxtaposition that did not look very good.
No, but I mean, you already mentioned one of the revelations. Yeah, it turns out that the industrialist's company, so the guy who hired Dolph, he is responsible for creating the virus that infected and then toppled the entire city. However, the film really never goes into detail about how this pandemic was originated or how it spread. It's just he created it, and then we also find out
that's a huge. Okay, don't go away from that yet. That's a huge plot hole because this opening 15 sequence is basically an Expendables type breakout. Like they've got Dolph Lundgren and his team. They seem to be ex-mercenaries as well. One guy gets away with the chopper. He gets to the chopper, gets out of the city. The other guys get killed by the zombie attack. So now it's just the lone wolf Dolph who's going to go complete the mission by getting this girl that they've been paid for to get her out of the city still. So everyone else has abandoned him either through death or just like, you know, the mission's over. We can't find her. The city's too big, which is a fair statement. Finding somebody in the city would be very hard. So that being said, why are they not infected? Because it said the virus spread like wildfire, that people were getting the virus and they had to shut down the city before it spreads to the rest of the world. Good plan. But now we've got soldiers in there and other survivors that live in the city that aren't infected, and they give no indication why they're not infected. We do know that the infection does come from bites. So did everyone just get bitten that are infected? Is that the only way? Yeah. It's not airborne?
They never take the time to go into it because I think in the end, to give Mr. Hatton and the rest of the production crew a little bit of credit, I think in the end, their big goal was to get to the main conceit of this film. Robots and zombies, baby. That's what we want.
Even discussing this, I forgot there was robots. Okay? I'm telling you right now, I keep forgetting there's robots in this film. And I don't know if that's good or bad. I think when they showed up, I was like, oh, these guys are here. Okay, so when the robots were first introduced, they were done in a very slow way. They were stomping around. And I thought originally it was the people that were protecting the perimeter were sending robots into the city to enforce people not leaving. I didn't even consider that they were there to get the zombies until they did at the big turn. It reminded me of Terminator 2, that you didn't know that Arnold was a good Terminator and he ends up protecting the boy instead of killing him. Remember that scene in the hallway?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, if you didn't know that Arnold was
in the trailer.
Exactly. So if you'd gone,
they spoiled that in the trailer, which was so stupid.
Here's the goal. I watched the trailer after watching this movie, and they spoil that reveal in the trailer. So I was one of the few people that saw this film. I thought the robots were there to get the good guys, so to speak, the main characters. I thought they were going to have to deal with zombies and robots. And so when the robots actually joined the team to get them out with the daughter, I don't know how I felt about that, because I thought maybe it would have been more crazy that they're actually up against robots as well as zombies.
Well, and it
kind of felt like they got a buff from like a video game. They got like this, like a companion on this role playing game where like, oh man, this guy just kind of takes care of everybody. These robots are a huge help, but it took the tension out of the film a little bit.
Well, the film, they do have some stakes to the film. There is a countdown or a timeline to the film, because this is the other big revelation, is that Gatling also has intel that the city is going to be firebombed in just a couple of days. So what this gives our characters are some stakes, as well as, like I said, a timeline to where they do have to get out of the city by a certain date, or they are going to be, nuked. Like, everybody else. And so that is one bit of information that Dolph's character is sitting on for about the first hour or so of the film, I'd say, before he finally lets everybody in on, okay, look, this is why I have to get you out.
Yeah, okay. So for our audience, if you're following this, and I apologize to our listening audience for a few reasons. I apologize that you're trying to follow this plot here because it shouldn't be as confusing as it sounds, but they have robots that are killing the zombies. It's never indicated who sent the robots. Is it the same people that wanted to firebomb the city? Because that doesn't make any sense. Like, why send the robots now? And there's only 5 of them to kill millions of zombies if they're going to firebomb them the next day.
Well, I think this is where it might be a good idea to, if we had seen the previous film Robotropolis, because my understanding in Robotropolis is these robots were in fact the antagonists. They were killer robots that everyone was having to, survive and stop and defeat and everything. And so the character of Reese does in a very quick line of exposition where he says these were robots that were created that ended up turning on their creators and have just been that have just been languishing in the city. So I guess if you want to, you could say that it is a sequel to that previous film, but it could also stand on its own 2 legs as well.
Sure. Well, it has to because I watched this as a standalone film. Did you hear where the robots walked from? They said where they came from. One of the Reese asked, "Where did you come from?" Did you hear where they walked from?
Remind me again.
He says, "We walked from Japan."
Nice.
Now, I'm not a geographical expert, I admit, but Japan is a country surrounded by water. So you can't walk from a country outside of Japan by land. Unless they walked underwater.
Maybe, I mean, if this film had more of a budget, then you could have gotten a really cool scene of them, converting into like some kind of mobile underwater vessel or something like that. That would have looked kind of cool, but it didn't have the budget or the resources to pull that off.
So they walked from Japan. Again, who sent them? I'm just confused.
Ryan, this is robots versus zombies, Ryan. We just have to,
I'm sorry. Again, I don't blame it for the low budget. Dolph did a great job. I actually enjoyed Dolph very much in this film. I thought he was great. I thought he handled his scenes very well. I thought he handled his action sequences very well. But for me, this is going to not really be a hot take, but I actually enjoyed the human drama, speaking about Walking Dead, much more than the action. I actually enjoyed... so when the movie first starts, he has a big sequence. For our listeners, it was a 15-minute cold open, which I couldn't believe. I checked the clock of the film. So the title card comes up, Battle of the Damned, at the 15-minute mark. I was okay, interesting. Because the next part of the film is now... Yeah, because it's ballsy. In a weird way. Because Yeah, because how should I say this? It kind of makes the film be more important than it has any right to be, if that makes sense. Like, this is Battle of the Damned. It's like, okay, but I like it at the same time because it's being treated like this is being on a big screen waiting for people waited 2 years during this production to see this film, but we haven't, but I like the idea that even the film starts off with, it's a Chris Hatton film. Like, you do that when you're Steven Spielberg or Christopher Nolan. You don't do that when you're Chris Hatton. But I love the idea that, it's a Chris Hatton film? Okay, this is going to be good. You know what I mean? Like, sorry, I don't mean to crap on this guy, but for your second big film to say this is a Chris Hatton film, it's kind of a ballsy statement. Like, this is a Ryan Rebalkin podcast. Like, stand by for some amazing stuff, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, and... Okay, so I mean, we already kind of danced around it, but before we get to the human component, which I'm glad that you brought that up, so that's an excellent segue, I do want to just give a little bit of time to the character quirks that Lundgren added to the character of Max Gatling. And we mentioned it briefly, but look, we have to mention it again, okay? There's these little character touches that I guess were, in fact, Dolph's idea. One is the reading glasses that we see him pull out quite a bit. And the
classic aging protagonist. I wear glasses. I'm getting older.
There you go. And the toothpick. Okay, you notice he always pulls out that toothpick and puts it in. And so I can't help but wonder if in these moments here, Lundgren is channeling not just Snake Plissken, but also Sylvester Stallone's Cobra.
No, that's fair. Yeah, I see that. Yeah. Okay. Scene. Yeah.
So, anyway, but I mean, you mentioned the human component, so let's just get there real quick, okay? I mean, so things
before you do, we should say at this point in the film, after the mercenary team has been split up or killed, and Dolph's character Gatling. By the way, Gatling, is named after a gun. So I find it interesting. His last name happens to be a Gatling gun. That's the old Western gun, the old machine gun of the West. The one you rotate with a lever.
And he doesn't get to fire at it, does he?
No, that's true.
Yeah, that would have been awesome. Yeah.
But I love those names where it just so happens this guy wasn't a kindergarten teacher. He's a mercenary. Of course, the last name Gatling. Okay, but
it's like that episode of Seinfeld when I don't know if you watch Seinfeld or not. Did you watch Seinfeld?
Oh, I love it. Yes.
Yeah, I called before. I got this notice in the mail.
Tropic of Cancer, Henry Miller. This case has been turned over to our library investigations officer, Mr. Bookman.
Bookman? The library investigator's name is actually Bookman?
It's true.
That's amazing. That's like an ice cream man named Cone.
Lieutenant Bookman's been working here for 25 years, so I think he's heard all the jokes.
Yeah, there you go. That's exactly. There you go. So the next sequence is we see a female character on her own, and she's got this like crazy makeup under her eyes. She looks like a video game character. She's got her hoodie up, which is a terrible thing to do. If you're trying to avoid zombies that run very fast, I would recommend not blocking out your peripheral vision. So it's always a weird movie trope when you see the main characters blocking all their view behind them or to the side with a hoodie on. If you ever put on a hoodie, you can't see to the left or right of you.
Well, there is. I'm glad you brought that up because there is, in my opinion, a really effective and a really awesome jump scare in that scene where she's in that convenience store.
Yes.
You know the scene I'm talking about?
It's one of my notes, and I will say that was a legit. Don't watch the trailer, ladies and gentlemen, if you're going to watch this movie. I guess now we're telling it to you. But that was a moment where it was actually at that moment where I was hopeful that we had something different here. So that it was actually a legit, like we have even though it's straight to video and a lower budget, which is fine. I don't fault it for having a lower budget than your standard films in Hollywood because that's just what they are. I thought, that's a well shot. And I'm a guy that doesn't scare easily. I don't scare in movies, but I was like, that was good. That was pretty effective.
So spoiler, I'll just say it right now. So basically, Jude, that's the character's name, she's in this convenience store rifling through, trying to get some supplies. The convenience store worker, who is one of these zombies, is behind the counter. He appears to be asleep. And so the camera moves to Jude's character trying to get something off the wall. Then it goes back to, sleepy convenience store clerk. But in this shot, his eyes are wide open. He is staring right at her and just jumps at her. I'll tell you what, man, I jumped at this part. I think that was so well done and so effective.
No, I absolutely agree. Totally agree. Yeah. Well, so how come the zombies don't climb ladders?
That's a good point. But they do sprint like hell, man.
They sprint.
I'll give them that.
So they're able to navigate corners. They're able to chase after their prey. We do see them do stairs, but they're unable to climb a ladder.
I didn't even think
or
about
a gate.
That.
Well, because we see a scene where Dolph escapes them by going over a gate, and they just crash into the gate to reach out for him. It's an effective scene that they're grasping for the character, and Dolph puts in his toothpick and says, "Ha ha, you can't get me" type posture. But I'm like, why don't they know to climb over the gate the same way they climb a stair or navigate a corner?
Well, you brought up a really good question. But here's the next question I had is when Dolph does rescue, or Dolph's character, Max Gatling, when he finally does rescue the Jude character, I had to rewind it because I was struggling with, how did he find this motorcycle and how did he find her as easily as he did? I guess maybe he was just traveling where there was noise, I guess, right?
And we should also tell the audience that the zombies come out when there's noise. They make that very clear, but they're inconsistent again with either where the zombies are located or their care factor about making noise. So the motorcycle is extremely loud, so his rescue vehicle is the noisiest thing he could find. So he's driving around his vehicle to pick up his mission, the daughter, who turns out to be this girl, Jude. We don't know how. There's no indication why or how he found her. We're almost led to believe they already knew each other. And then we find out they didn't know each other. And in her mind, Jude's mind, she's just had a 6'4" hulk of a figure, quote unquote, rescue her. He doesn't even tell her anything, just basically kidnaps her, takes her to his place. And she's like, just so you know, I'm not going to sleep with you. And that's a good comment to make because at this point, we don't know if he's just like a rapist. He hasn't told her anything. Why doesn't he say, hey, I know this is all overwhelming. You just got chased by zombies. I'm happy to save you. But just so you know, I'm actually here to not just save you from the zombies that were chasing you, but I'm here to get you out of the city. I was hired to do so. There's nothing to fear. But he acts angry towards her.
Isn't that, I mean, okay, I get that. Isn't it a cool shot, though? I mean, that's what I took away most from this entire moment here is just how wicked Dolph looked sitting on a Harley, holding a hatchet and using a hatchet to slice and dice zombies. I thought that was pretty effective and looked really, really cool.
No, that's a great sequence, but that's where he's like, it's almost like a Terminator part. Go, come with me if you want to live. You know, like that's exactly what happens. He comes on a motorcycle, Terminator style, takes out the zombies with the axe. Great effective. Again, silent killer. Use the axe. You'll spare your bolts. A lot of great hand-to-hand combat against zombies in this film to spare your bolts and to be quieter about it, not to attract more zombies. But there should have just been, like, I'm not a director, I'm not a writer, but if I was I always wanted to be a quality control person on the set. Like, I would have said, okay, at this moment, these two characters have met for the first time. There has to be more of a human, naturalistic way of saving her. She should be like, she should have almost been like, I don't know if I want to get on this bike. But then she looks over her shoulder and goes, but I've got 30 zombies chasing me. It's either the stranger who looks scary in his own right, jump on his bike and get away from the zombies and deal with him later, talk to him later, or I take on the zombies. But there was no indication that she just jumped right on like they've known each other forever. And then when they get to his house or wherever he's been holed up, you know, she's like wondering if she's going to get raped. Like there was no discussion.
Well, fun fact real quick, because, I mean, I did do a little bit of research, and I don't know if you found this as interesting as I did or not, but as I was going back through and looking at all of the various actors in this particular film, I looked up Jude, and so the actress who plays Jude, her name is Melanie Zanetti. So for me, Ryan, this was a really fun fact, okay? She does her most recent acting gig is she does voice work on a cartoon series on Disney called Bluey. And this is, I don't know if your kids, they might be a little too old for it, but my kids adore this show. It is an Australian cartoon about a family of Australian cattle dogs, I'm assuming, and the wacky adventures they get into. But she plays the mom. So I guess we can say Dolph here, there's degree of separation between Dolph and Disney. I guess right there. There you go. So,
yeah, pretty soon Dolph will be a Disney character. But yeah, so that was my biggest complaint about that, because even I, as a viewer, was confused. I was like, is this his mission? Like, it wasn't until we didn't even know as a viewer. We assumed it was the daughter, but she looked very capable in her own right, because we figured she's got this cool makeup job under her eyes. She's survived so far in this city, so we know that she can kind of take care of herself. There was some fighting that she did on her own before she quote unquote got rescued by Dolph's character. So I'm like, is this the daughter? Because she's doing okay so far on her own, and if she wanted to be saved or any indication she needed saving, she wasn't showing it just yet. It might have been like, are you Jude? Yes, I am. Well, get on my bike because I'm here for you. And she could just say, well, who are you? We'll explain later as the zombies are coming. You know, like just some sort of indication. Because as an audience member, we didn't even know they didn't know each other. It almost seemed like they didn't know each other until she's like accusing him of sexual assault incoming. He's like, no, I'm not going to do that. But it's a right thing for her to say, because at this point, she's had a whole bike ride with him. She's entered her house without any struggle. She's just followed them into the house. And then she's like, what do you want of me?
Well, I mean, and the film, I mean, for me at least, okay, this film is like 85 minutes, okay? It does slow way down. So basically, Jude takes Max Gatling back to where she has been living, and so we encounter the character of Duke, basically the character of Duke, along with a group of other random survivors. There's only like 5 of them, really, are living in this huge palatial mansion with...
It's huge.
Yeah, I mean, it's this gigantic mansion, and they are under strict orders just to never leave the compound. And so, of course, they do end up leaving the compound eventually. But there's a little bit of distrust there where Jude and this Duke character don't really trust Gatling, but then they eventually learn to kind of join forces. But yeah, it does grind to a halt in these moments, and we get some character.
Well, that's the irony. That's the irony. This is where I was interested.
See, and okay, so that's where I guess you and I disagree a bit. But on the other hand, I do kind of like it because they do give some characterization to these characters. Okay, we find out we'll get to one of the big plot points of the film. I guess it's discovered that Jude is pregnant with the child of
Reese.
Reese. Yeah, so basically they have a kid on the way. So once Reese discovers that oh wow, Jude is pregnant with my child, he enlists Gatling to where he says, okay, you know what? I trust you. You're a badass. You're efficient at what you do. You need to get me and Jude and our unborn child the hell out of this city, please, especially before it's firebombed.
Yeah, so we should go back to Duke, who's an older gentleman. He's basically running some sort of cult-like compound.
Yeah,
but he's basically saying
only 5 people.
Five people, exactly. And 3 are Caucasian, 2 are Asian. And again, this is an Asian city, but so the odds are you would think 5 survivors. You would think the odds if you had a city of 1 million people in some random Asian city, right? And you were to tell me there's going to be 5 survivors out of 1 million people, would you have guessed 3 of them would have been white? But we're never told quite how they met, how they formed trust enough to stay together. Why were those 3 Caucasians in the same geographical area of survivors? How did they survive as long as they did before they met up? How is their house or mansion fortified? It's not really shown or told, but they're able to sustain their life as long as they have in this chaos of zombies. I'm glad they showed survivors. I was hoping there would be more random ones running around. We're led to believe it's just the 5 of them out of this millions and millions and millions of people because, let's be honest, it's a pretty big city. You can assume there's at least 1 million people in the city. I felt there was more of a story to be told about why they were the way they were in a fairly short period of time.
Well, that was actually one of the questions that I did ask Chris Hatton, and I did mention the fact that did you guys consider more of a backstory between Gatling's character and everything? Like, did you guys consider a sequel or anything like that? And they were kind of developing and kind of spitballing some ideas here and there, but unfortunately, that never got underway.
Yeah,
but,
I get it, cool. But you don't have to do a big backstory. This isn't an episode of Lost where they all have their own episode. They could have just said we were. They could have easily just said we were working at the factory, or we worked together at some sort of whatever. Let's be honest, where white people who speak English are working. So pick language school, some sort of international facility, and we somehow didn't get infected. We don't know how or why, but we have stuck together. We've made it our goal to stay alive. And so what I've done here is this Duke guy could have said, what I've done is we've established this place as a safety zone, and we don't know how long we can live here, but we just know we've lived here as long as we have. And so if we leave, that's where the danger is. So we never leave alone. Jude should have left. Now she's come back with this big guy who we don't trust. I don't know. That took me 20 seconds. I don't know why they couldn't just say this is how we work together. Yeah. That's why we already have this. We already have relationships. But they have this, particularly the Asian sword fighter. He had this real loyalty to Duke, but it's never explained why. Why are you so loyal to this guy? You guys just met out of an apocalypse not that long ago. Like, we're not led to believe this has been going on for 6 years. This was like a matter of, I don't know. Maybe a few months, maybe 6 months, maybe even a year max, maybe. But again, I don't know how long you could sustain a quarantine around a city. It's interesting, the zombies themselves. Did they ever leave the quarantine? I guess they just get shot down. I'm in the military, not that I know very much because I'm in the Navy, but to secure a city, the manpower required for that is huge. It's very easy just to get away, like in the dead of night, just walk away. Do they have every square inch covered? The amount of manpower and time it would take to cover a city block, let alone a city limit, that's incredible manpower. You think at that point they would just, if they were able to circle the city with people with weapons, why don't they just go through the city and start shooting everybody?
Well, there's your sequel. There we can.
Sorry, I don't mean to. And then they're going to nuke the city anyways.
Right.
So what are we waiting for here?
Well, okay. I completely, sympathize and agree with all of those. Let's get to the robots real quick. We've kind of talked about the robots.
I keep forgetting. There's robots in this film. I'm not even joking. Oh, the robots. Sorry.
So let's talk about them, because the robots versus zombie fights. Again, this is, I think, what the big factor was that got this film made. Okay, that this film was sold on. Okay, so Gatling and Reese are in the city. Like I said, Reese he doesn't really hire, but he enlists Gatling. Reese says, "Look, I need you to get us out." Okay, and of course, Jude is Gatling's mission. Okay, to get her out as well. So as they're in the city, they encounter this rogue army of killer robots who are just wandering the city.
5.
And they discover, there you go. And they discover that these machines, they are extremely skilled at dispatching zombies. So what Gatling does is he reprograms them so that they are now soldiers who are going to assist Gatling in destroying the zombie hordes.
Don't move.
Good doggy. Say what?
Do you require medical assistance?
What you mean?
Are you injured?
No.
Okay, so now what?
What are you?
Advanced utility robots.
Where'd you come from?
These models were assembled at Medora Industries Robotics Hub, Tokyo.
How'd you get here?
We walked.
You dangerous?
I do not understand.
Are you gonna hurt us?
No.
You ever hurt anyone?
Yes.
Ever killed anyone?
Yes.
Why did you do it?
The operating code of all models in service on the Medora Deep Crescent location was corrupted, causing a system-wide execution error.
You got that?
Okay, so what happened?
The error was corrected.
What about them?
I do not understand.
Well, they're dead. You killed them.
They are not people.
How do you know that?
Sensory devices indicate normothermic values are too low. They are not people.
Means they're too cold. Can I touch you?
Yes.
Whoa, serious nerdgasm.
And so we do get, and again, this is something else. I hate to keep referring back to, the episode that I did, 3 years ago or so. But this is something else that Christopher Hatton said, is he said, look, we wanted to have a lot of robots versus zombies fights, but unfortunately we didn't have the budget and the resources to pull that off. So we do get a few that's in there. And I don't know if you picked up on this or not, but in these robots versus zombie fights, what we get is we get tons of shaky cam and then close-up shots of the action. And so I have a theory about this here, and I thought I'd get your opinion on that to see.
Well, the shaky cam was the shaky cam. It's, and I don't mean an insult to Mr. Hatton if he's listening to this podcast. It's just a way to save money because you don't have to quite CGI. Yeah, you kind of shake it up a little bit. It's like, oh, the makeup job or the bad CGI. You never get a chance to focus on it.
Well, we see this in a lot of big budget. I mean, let's be perfectly honest, Ryan. We see shaky cam in a ton of big budget
and I hate shaky cam. I don't like shaky cam at all.
And I think I have it figured out now. I've seen enough movies now where I figured out. I think directors, producers, whoever it may be, I think that shaky cam is almost it's almost kind of a sort of a special effects Band-Aid of sorts, where it can hide some of the shortcomings that are there in terms of the special effects and the fight scenes, etc., but still look respectable and still look cool. Same thing with slow motion. if you think about it, a lot of films. I mean, and I hate the dog, Mr. Jean-Claude Van Damme. I love Mr. Jean-Claude Van Damme, but let's think about it. Every time in one of those movies in the early '90s, every time he did his famous 360 jump kick, it was always in slow motion. Why was it always in slow motion? Because it looks badass. If you ever see him do that kick when it's not in slow motion, it's just kind of meh. Now, granted, it's not something
it's so fast. It's fast too.
So quick. And so, shaky cam, slow motion. These are camera techniques and trickery, if you want to call it that. That kind of hide what the budget can't do. And so, in these scenes where where the robots are just slaughtering the zombies, again, we see lots of shaky cam, but all we also see is pretty much just close-up shots of the robot heads and torso, as well as the zombie faces, and then immediately cuts away, and you just see the aftermath. And it's like, oh, I guess the zombies or the robots just tore everything apart here in that quick 20 seconds.
Let me be. I feel like look, the film deserves the critiques I'm giving it, but I will give it credit where credit is due. And one of them, well, of course, I'll say it again. Dolph was great in the film. He's very. This is a film that showcased his ability to carry a film, which I hope I have to go back and watch other films where he does this, where he's kind of given a movie with huge plot holes, which is fine. This is part of movies, I understand. And I always say movies have to live within their own universe. I'm not trying to compare the plot holes to real life. I'm just saying within this universe, I didn't understand the inconsistencies and why things were happening the way they were. But that being said, I do give the filmmakers credit that they filmed all of this in the daylight. Now, I don't know if that was just to save money, so they had to have lighting rigs or whatever. But the majority of the film, there were some underground scenes in the finale of the movie and inside the building scenes. But I will give them the credit where they didn't hide CGI and fighting scenes. Everything was broad daylight, and so as a viewer, it was all visible. There wasn't any dark scenes because, again, that's another trick that filmmakers make that I hate. Is like, can I see the movie, please? So this movie, at least I got to watch it. It was there. I got to see everything. It was nice and bright.
Well, I think this is also, I mean, and I've echoed this on previous episodes of the show, but because I don't know if you knew this or not, Ryan, but this is not the first post-apocalyptic movie that Dolph Lundgren has had the pleasure of doing. Yeah, but I think this is one of the big perks to where a lot of directors like to do films that are that take place in like a post-apocalyptic world. Because if you really, really think about it, a movie that takes place in this post-apocalyptic wasteland or what have you, these are relatively cheap to make and produce. Because if you really think about it, you don't need much in terms of sets, okay? And what sets you do have can be half built, if you will. And then you can also film in daylight and use natural lighting, so you don't have to rig lighting or anything like that. And so it makes sense why, I mean, if you think about it, think about all of the direct-to-video films that came out throughout the 90s and the early 2000s. They all took place in the future, but the future was a wasteland. It's not because they wanted to tell a new Mad Max type story. It's because it's cheap to make. It was cheap to produce. You know what I mean?
Right. So I'll give them credit for that.
And we also get, I mean, and I don't want to throw it out there because it was also in the trailer for the film, but there is a great money shot of the film, and I'm sure you picked up on it as well. But I think this is one of the things that was sold. We get a great money shot where Dolph and one of the robots are standing back to back, firing their machine guns. It reminded me of that shot in the first Avengers movie. Do you remember that where the camera circles around the team as they're gearing up? That's what we get there.
Yeah, well, yeah, in the Marvel universe and the Chris Hatton universe are very similar.
There you go.
I also give the credit to just as I was about to write the note. Did the robots ever run out of ammo? They did. I'll give them credit. They ran out of ammo. So there you go. Again, a credit to the quote unquote realism. The robots, we've run out of ammo, and then they just started beating zombies with their fists.
I'm going to go back to it, though. I like the idea you brought up earlier about writing Dolph's hip injury into the script, because then that would have been cool as well, where Dolph said, look, I can't take on these hordes by myself. I need to enlist these robots here. You know what I mean? Like they can do physically what I cannot do at this moment here. I think that would have been kind of cool.
Agreed. Now, what did you think of what seemed like it should have taken a long time, but I think in movie time it might have taken 2 hours. Dolph and his and Jude, they equipped these robots with like Inspector Gadget guns and stuff, and they armor these robots up even more to for the final battle. What did you think of that little A-team montage?
Hey, it was a montage. I appreciate montages when they're shown in films, but I at that point, to be perfectly honest, Ryan, I was kind of like, look, it's robots versus zombies. I'm not expecting too much more here, and to be perfectly honest, on that front, I think it delivered.
Okay, it's just when they came out and they literally, like, the dog robot was wearing spiked armor. Yeah. I guess there was that little sequence where we see the point of vision through the robot dog's robotic eyes, and we're seeing him skewer zombies as he runs through them with his spikes. Right. I was just like, okay, it's fine, it's fair, it's fun. I wasn't laughing at the film. I was just like, okay, I know it's silly, but again, it looked a little bit corny, but I was like, you know what, that's fine. He just built it in 2 hours. I was almost more bugged on how quickly he was able to do it. That's all.
Well, if we look at the third act of the film, I mean, the final battle that takes place, this is pretty interesting here. I don't know if you noticed this or not either. Okay, but the final battle takes place in an abandoned shopping mall. So this came from Chris Hatton. Okay, this is instant production value here. So what we're seeing on screen, this is an actual abandoned shopping mall that completely sat empty and desolate. Supposedly, it was rumored to be haunted. So people never really went near it. And so, again, from a production standpoint that takes place in this post-apocalyptic wasteland, that's pretty cool. The fact that they found this old building that they really didn't have to dress up and they shot everything there. I think that's pretty economic. That's pretty efficient. And
it looked good. It did look good. The tone of the film. Yeah, and it did look good because I was thinking while I was watching, of course, this is a stupid statement. I was thinking while I was watching that the set looked really good, and there you go, that makes sense. They kind of had a ready-to-go set, so it worked in their favor. Okay.
And so, okay, spoiler, I guess.
Sure.
Gatling,
Jude,
and Reese, they are able to escape the firebombing, but Gatling here...
Come on, okay, slow down. Bombs... of nuclear power were dropped on them, and you know how ladies and gentlemen, you know how you can escape a nuclear blast? This is science. This is actually science. Just go underwater. Water, deflects nuclear warheads.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. I love how they would have been cooked.
Bill Nye.
Yeah, they would. Oh man, they would have been cooked alive at the very least. But I love how they come out of the water and there's literally fire. And this was very poor CGI fire, but there was fire all around them. They're having a conversation, like no feeling of the heat or pain or the fire that's enveloping because you're in water. So there you go. To escape nuclear warfare, guys, just sit in your bathtub.
There you go. Or what did Indiana Jones do? Didn't he get into a
refrigerator? Yeah.
There you go. He got into a refrigerator.
Yeah, we're not going to go there with that.
Well, so right before credits roll, we do see Gatling. He's faced with a dilemma here, right? His mission was to not only rescue Jade, but also to eliminate anyone who could be a quote-unquote whistleblower regarding the whole outbreak. And so he's faced with, okay, do I kill Reese or not? However, he declines. He doesn't do it. And the three walk off into an unknown future with the last remaining robot on their side. So apparently they've established a kind of a bizarre little family unit. And some kind of jokes here. Gatling even suggests that they name their unborn child Max, and then he asks the robot to fetch him a coffee as the credits roll. So I would love to see the sequel here that would originate between Reese, Jude, baby Max, and the robot here. I think that's a sitcom in the making. So
I was half expecting the robot to actually leave to find coffee. I'm not even joking. I was like, it's going to leave. It's going to follow the order blindly and go grab some coffee. But it didn't.
Well, okay, so here we are. I mean, I know we've really gone the gamut of this film, but I mean, it's an 85-minute film. Yeah, it's robots versus zombies in a post-apocalyptic world. Dolph plays a character named Max Gatling, who pretty much fires. What is it? He stands side by side robots and blasts zombies away with a machine gun. It's really kind of interesting because this was actually, I remember when the film was in pre-production and I was following it. I was kind of surprised because for Dolph, I was like, man, this is a pretty wild and weird project for Dolph to do. He hadn't really done anything horror related, if you will, in his career.
Right.
What science fiction films he had done were pretty, few and far between. So it was just really wild, him in the wake of his Expendables comeback, for him to sign on for a movie, not only where he's battling zombies, but teaming up with robots. It was like, this could be the weirdest thing Dolph has ever done.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But not a bad film. And I know I critiqued it, but I have to critique with the parts, like I said, that I struggled with the most. Just the plot holes were so big that they could have easily been fixed with a little bit more narrative. That's all. You can save a lot. You don't have to have a storyboard it. You don't have to even show it. You don't have to do CGI. They could have just narrated a little bit more to each other why the group is the way they were, the humans that were found. Because, in fact, after Dolph got Jude at the beginning of the film and had her, I was actually hoping and say, I hope there's a band of survivors that we get to meet. I was hoping for it. And we got it. And they were actually fairly interesting. The leader, Duke, the leader of this group, was actually a very interesting character. And I actually enjoyed the interactions. But again, I was just like, why are you together? And so I kind of like, when some of the members died the way they died, I didn't really feel much of it because I didn't know why they were a group to begin with. A quick narrative would have explained that. Again, a quick narrative just explain how they were able to quarantine and who exactly, what nation or company was agreeing to not let people. So the rule was, I don't think we even stated it quite enough, is that nobody was allowed to leave the city whether they were infected or not. So they're just saying, if it sucks to be you to be in the city of zombies. And so it's a real barbaric thing that they wouldn't even take survivors. So survivors weren't even allowed to leave the city, but no explanation of who authorized this, who's enforcing this, and why. Again, a quick narrative could have just said, why, they don't want it to spread. Okay. But we see that there's survivors who aren't getting infected. Shouldn't we study this? Also, what nations are supported? They would never allow this to happen. No survivors can leave. They would never nuke a city with the survivors there. It's just impossible. But this was allowed to happen, again, by what nation and what authorization?
Well, okay, so story quibbles aside, okay, I do have to ask, because I always like to do two recommendations. I like to do two recommendations, Brian. One as a film in general and one as a Dolph Lundgren film. So you've basically kind of given us your recommendation as far as a zombie film, but what about as a Dolph Lundgren film? Okay, someone who has not seen a heck of a lot of Dolph's direct video stuff. What do you think? Where does this one stand for you?
Well, absolutely. If you're a fan of Dolph Lundgren, you need to see this film. I enjoyed it, and I like Dolph. And here's the thing: I do like him. It is a straight-to-video. It is lower budget. Go in with, I don't say zero expectations, but go in with the knowledge that it is within the genre that it is, and it is a lot of fun. And I kind of feel bad that people have been spoiled on the robots, but you'll still get a kick out of them. The robots are not bad at all. The CGI isn't horrible. Their personalities or how they operate is pretty good. Like, I don't really have any real complaints about it. I just, as a film, I enjoyed the human dynamics more than the actual fighting of the zombies. Not that I've seen it before. It's been there, done that. It's just that kind of stuff. Maybe as I get older, here's the thing. I was actually thinking, had I seen this same movie with a younger Dolph, but everything else the same, in 1994 when I was 18 years old, I probably would have really liked it, if that makes sense. I'm just a little bit older, and I've been there, done that with fight sequences. So nothing new with the fighting of zombies, nothing original. But for a Dolph film and for robots versus zombies, well, it's the first of its kind, I think. So sure, why not?
Well, thank you very much for that. With regard to my recommendation, we've basically said it. I think there's really not much to say about this one. I mean, I think this is a fun movie. Okay, I think that's the best word you can use to describe it.
Watch it with a group of people, maybe. Watch it with some friends.
Maybe even with a beverage, kind of like you and I have.
I agree.
There you go. Is it exactly high art? Obviously not.
No,
but I think, considering what the director and the production team and everyone had to work with in terms of budget and shooting days, I think they pulled off a pretty cool and atmospheric action horror movie thing. I think I said it earlier, but I'll echo it again. I think the color palette and the dark, the darkness to the film that we see is very, very striking. And I honestly do think if this film had more resources at its disposal, then this is a conceit that I think that I could see going theatrical for like a summer blockbuster release. You know what I mean? Every summer we've had a Transformers movie for crying out loud.
Right.
So can you imagine, a zombies versus robots type apocalypse movie? I could see something like that going theatrical. What was the one that we had years ago with the giant robots fighting like the Godzilla monsters? What was that? Pacific Rim?
Pacific Rim? Yeah. I never saw that.
Go. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
But in the end, I think at its core, this is if you had to describe this film to anybody, this is Dolph Lundgren, killer robots, and zombies. So I think if that idea is appealing to you, then I think there is some fun to be had here.
Absolutely. No, I agree. And I guess in a selfish way, I got to enjoy it even more knowing that I was going to do an episode with you on your podcast. And I feel honored that you asked me to be a part of your show.
Yeah, no, well, and I had fun. Talking this film with you. I'm sorry that it took us so long to get together, but we've been running around in the same circles for the past couple years, and we've been talking about it. That here we are. Before I let you go, is there anything else that you want to give a shout out to, or plug, or mention? I know we talked about going the distance, but anything else that you're working on, or anything else you want to mention?
I do have another podcast. I don't talk about it all that much, and maybe I should more because maybe get some more more listens. But I think it's a lot of fun. It's called the Worst of the Best podcast. Again, that's the Worst of the Best. What we basically do is we pick a topic, whether it's a musical artist, an album, an actor, or actress, or a topic like a conspiracy theory or whatever it might be, and then we break it down to whatever the best of that thing is. And then at the end of it, we discuss each point, the best this is the best that. And we, at the end of it, me and my co-host, whoever it is for that week, we then discuss what we think is the worst from that best. So, for example, the whole show started when I started, again, with my brother a few years back. The idea was he was listening to one of his favorite albums and from Pearl Jam back in the day. And he was listening to it again. And he's like, oh, man, this is such a great album. But he's like, even this album has a stinker, so everything that is the best, there's always something that's the worst of that best. And so that's the how that show started. And for example, we just did Metallica, the Black Album, because that's their best selling album, right? So that's how that fell in. So this is their best selling album. It might not be your favorite album by Metallica, which isn't me and my brother. So we talk about that, but we then pick what we think is the worst song from their best selling album. So that's how it works.
That's a cool concept. That is
the worst of the best. Yeah, the worst of the best. So your listeners, if you're listening to this, guys, trust me, check it out. We've got over 100 episodes, and there's topics that, I guarantee you there's a topic, an actor, celebrity, or something that will be of interest to you. And I think the way we break it down, you might enjoy. It's not so much just the reveal of the worst pick. I think our discussion as we talk about each point before our reveal is quite fun.
Awesome. Well, cool.
Yeah,
well,
thanks for letting me plug that.
Yeah, no, of course. And again, we have joined forces. We are on the Last of the Action Heroes podcast network. So there's tons of other cool podcasts. This one, obviously, but yours as well as all of the others looking at the true action heroes of the 80s and the 90s are all over there.
Absolutely. I love it. I love that you're part of it. Thanks for trusting us. I think, were you the first one that joined?
I think I might have been because you guys were already, you guys already had the Sylvester Stallone ones, but I was the first one after that, and then the other ones just kept coming. So
yeah, that's amazing. So thanks for trusting us and being a part of that umbrella.
Well, to everyone out there who is listening, please feel free to rate and review the show on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever else you go to subscribe. We always appreciate the reviews, and we'll see you all next time on I Must Break This Podcast.